Hello, and welcome to your first day of video app development. All right, so the plan for today is to sort of walk you through the process of building your first app. And we're going to do this entirely together. You're not going to have to figure anything out on your own. It's just going to be our chance to sort of walk through the process and see how it all works. All right. So first things first, you need to go to the MIT App Inventor site. A very easy way to do that is just Google MIT App Inventor, right? It's probably going to be the first result that pops up. We can click on MIT App Inventor. It'll bring up the site. And then you're looking for the orange button that says Create Apps, right? Either it's going to sign you in automatically or it's going to ask to sign in with Google. We are just going to always sign in with our Google account. If you haven't set it up yet, just choose sign in with Google. There's mine, so I can sign in. I can try to type my password. All right, and then you should get a screen that looks something like this. All right, yours is probably going to be blank or maybe just have one sort of piece there. If it opened it up to an app right at the very start, you can always just go to this menu here that says My Projects and click on My Projects, and that'll bring you back to sort of this main screen here. All right, so what we're going to do today is we're going to start a new project. So we've got this button over here. We can click on Start a New Project. And the app that we're going to make is just a little basic calculator. All right, this is going to give us a good opportunity to see how the design features work. It's going to let us talk about a few different coding concepts. So it's a simple little app that may not be as simple as you think it would be, that we're going to set up so that you can sort of get a feel for this software. So the project name can be whatever you want. I'm going to just call it My Calc for my calculator. Again, name it whatever you want, something that you're going to recognize and be able to find in the future. All right. So I'm going to click OK. And when I do that, it's going to open up this blank sort of MIT App Inventor screen. Right? And this is where we're going to set up the layout for our app. All right. We're not doing any coding yet. We're just setting up the visual look of the interface here. All right, now as far as our visual look goes, we're basically going to be setting up a table full of buttons, all right, representing the different buttons that you would find on a calculator. So first things first, over on the left-hand side here, this is where we can add different things to our apps. So buttons, checkbox, date pickers, images, labels, so on and so forth. We're going to start with a layout. All right, so if we click on layout here, it expands the menu, and we're going to use the table arrangement. So this will make it very easy for us to kind of line everything up the way that we want to line it up. So I'm going to click on table arrangement. I'm going to left click and then drag it over into my app. And you'll see this green box pop up. This is my table arrangement. And then you'll also see it listed over here inside of the components. Now, when you have components, if you click on one of these, you're going to see that the properties window over here changes. So these properties refer to whatever component you're currently clicked on. So if I click on screen 1, these are the properties I can change on screen 1. I can change how things are centered. Do I want them left centered, right centered, or centered? Same thing with the vertical alignment. I can change my app name. I can choose a different default color. I can put in a background image. So that would be like a wallpaper type situation. So there's all sorts of things here that we can change. Screen orientation. Do you want to lock your app into portrait mode or landscape mode, or do you want it to be unspecified so that it goes back and forth? Do you want people to be able to like scroll up and down? So there's all sorts of sort of properties that we can change for each one that we're dealing with. As far as the table arrangement is concerned, what we want to do is we want to change the columns to 4. We're going to have 4 columns in our table. We're going to leave the height as automatic, and that's going to let it just grow automatically as we add things to it. Fill parent would make it take up the entire screen. And then pixels lets you specify a specific size in pixels, which are like the individual little points of color on the screen. And then percentage lets you set it as like a percent size of the screen. Generally, it's a smarter idea to use percentage because different people have different size phones. So if you use pixels, it might look right on one person's phone, but then look off on another person's phone. So generally, we're going to use either fill parent or percentages. Pixels is a little more dangerous because depending on the person's phone, it might not look as nice as you want it to. But height, we're just going to leave automatically. Width, we're going to let it fill the parent. So it's going to take up the whole screen left to right. And then rows, we are also going to include 4 rows. All right, so now we have a 4x4 table that we're going to be able to add different elements to. All right, and for our calculator, basically we're just adding lots of buttons. All right, we're adding the individual buttons of our calculator. So to get the buttons, you go back up to this user interface on the left-hand side here, and we're going to click on button. And again, we're going to drag it over into our table. And you'll see that there's like these 4 different spots up and down that we just created. All right, so we're going to put the first button here, and it's going to say text for button 1. But now we're clicked on the button, so we have the button properties. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to change this text, and we're going to change it to just the number 1. So this is going to be our button for when we're typing in the number 1. For right now, let's see, is there anything else we want to change? Background color, we can leave the same. Font size, we can leave the same. We are going to change the width. So we're going to go here. We wouldn't want to fill parent because then the button would take up the whole screen. We're going to set it as %. Now we have 4 buttons. So we're going to set each one to about 22%. All right, we're not going to use 25% because then there's no room for like the space in between. But we'll set each button to about 22%. So there's our first button. And then this part is going to be a little tedious. I'm not going to lie. But we're going to have to go and do that same thing for the other ones. So I'm adding button 2. I'm going to change this to a 2. I'm going to change the width to 22%. And I'm going to hit OK. I'm going to do the same thing here. Change this to a 3. Change this to 22%. And I'm just going to keep going. So at this point, I'm going to walk through and set up every single button, but you don't have to watch me do that if you don't want to. I mean, feel free to like pause the video, skip ahead to where all the buttons are in place. Because really all I'm about to do is go through and add 16 buttons. So might not be worth watching that. But I leave that up to you. So this one right here is going to be our plus sign. And again, I'll change the width to 22%. Now you might be thinking to yourself, is there a way I can just like copy these to make it go quicker? Unfortunately not. So again, we are just kind of stuck doing these sort of one at a time here. Now I will say there's a reason I'm not dragging all the boxes in at once. It's because their size would be a little too big and then they start going off the screen. So it's actually easier to do them sort of one at a time here in order. So 5, and then width, 22%. Okay. Isn't this fascinating? This is the glory of making apps. Systematically dragging 16 buttons over into an interface. All right, subtraction sign, width, %, 22. Click OK. Button 9 is actually text 7. Width is 22%. Button This is button 8, and width is 22%. This is button 9, is 22%. Does it feel like a broken record yet? Because I feel like a broken record. All right, at least this one's a little different. This one's our multiplication sign. So much more exciting. But the width is still 22%. All right. And then let's see here. Text, this is our 0 key, but the width is still 22%. This is our equal sign. So at least this row is a little different. And then our width is 22%. This is our clear button if we want to erase our calculator. So I'm going to put CLR in there. And again, I'm going to change the width to 22%. And then last but not least, we're going to do some division. So let's put in the division sign there. And again, let's make the width 22%. All right. So at this point, we have our calculator. All right. 1, 2, 3 plus 4, 5, 6 minus 7, 8, 9 times 0 equals clear division. Now, when we start writing our code, we're going to have to associate code with each of these buttons. And these buttons have names. All right. Over here, we see button 1, button 2, button 3, button 4, button 5, button 6, button 7. Now, if you only have 1 or 2 buttons, button 1 or button 2 might be an acceptable name. Probably still not, but maybe. What's going to run into a problem here is these button numbers don't really match up to the keys of our calculator. So like the plus sign is button 4, and I can tell that because if I click on the plus sign, button 4 gets highlighted over here. The number 4 is actually button 5. That can be kind of confusing. So generally, we want to give the objects in our app names that relate to what they actually represent. So instead of calling this button 1, I'm going to call this num1, all right, so that I know that's number key 1. I'm going to go down here and change this one to num2, change this one to num3, and this one, let's give it a name that actually tells us what it is. So instead, I'm just going to call this plus. So that way, when I'm referring to it in my program, I know that this is the plus button, and I don't have to try to remember which is which. So again, a little tedious, but I'm going to go through and give these names that sort of correspond to what they actually are. Otherwise, when I start writing my program, it's going to be really difficult to know which code I'm supposed to associate with which button. All right, so button 8, I'm going to call the minus button. And then this one would be num7. This one would be num8. Num9. This I'm going to call the mult button for multiplication. And this is going to be num0. Call this one the equal button. Call this one the CLR button for clear, or you can just type clear. Why don't I just type clear? And then this is our division button, which I'm just going to abbreviate as div. All right, so now these all have names that correspond to what they actually do. Now, we're not going to write any code for the table arrangement, but you could also give the table arrangement a name. We could say that this is the keypad. And if we were writing code or we had multiple table arrangements, it would be helpful to know that this is the table arrangement that specifically deals with the keypad. All right, so again, just a good idea to sort of give them names that correspond to what they do. All right, last but not least, we're going to need a display screen for our answers to actually show up. So we're going to set up a display screen here that allows when they type the numbers to actually show up on the screen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have, let's use a label. So we're going to grab this text label. Now, I want to show you really quick. Let's say I accidentally drag the wrong thing and I accidentally drag in a list picker. No big deal. To get rid of something, you just click on it, and then the delete is over here. So like you don't just drag it out. That's not going to work. You actually just click on it over here, click delete. It'll make sure that you actually want to delete it. And if you had written any code that was associated with this, it would get rid of that code as well. So you got to make sure that you really want to do it, but then you click delete and it goes away. All right, so we're going to use a text label here. So I'm going to drag this text label in. All right. Again, I'm going to have the width of this one be fill parent so that it takes up the whole screen. I maybe want the text on this to be a little bigger. So I'm going to change the font size. Let's make it font size 20. I'm going to give it a background color so that it stands out. So I'm going to give it this cyan color so like it stands out. I'm going to keep the text. We'll keep the text color, the default, or black if you want to change it to black. Either one of those is fine. And then I'm going to put the label. I'm going to start it off as a 0 so that when the app loads up, there's just a 0 in there. So again, you can play around with this more if you want to, try to bold it or something like that. You're welcome to do that, make it stand out a little more. But basically, this is just what we're using as our display screen. All right, this is where when they type the numbers, it'll show up and you'll be able to kind of see everything that's going on there. Now, at this point, you might want to make sure how your app looks in the emulator. If you haven't installed the emulator yet, you might not be able to do this depending on the software, whether the software problem's been worked out yet. But for those of you that have it, if we want to see what this actually looks like, we're going to go to Connect, and then we're going to choose Emulator. All right. Now, if you have an Android phone, instead of choosing Emulator, you can choose the AI Companion. But if you don't have it, then you're going to be choosing Emulator. All right. So I'm going to click on the emulator here. And this takes a little bit. All right. It doesn't start up super quickly. So you're just going to have to be patient here. And you're going to see that I just got an error. It says launch the AI starter program on your computer and then try again. All right. Chances are you're going to see this error at some point. All right. Basically, what that means is you forgot to start the program on your computer. So you can click OK. It's not a big deal. You're going to go to your Start menu. You should have a folder now, if it's been installed, that says MIT App Inventor Tools. You can click on that down arrow there, and there should be a single program that says AI Starter. All right. When you click that, you might not see anything pop up on your screen, but down on the toolbar, you should see this AI Starter. It's just a black screen. This is what allows the computer to communicate with the website so that the emulator can actually start and like pull down the information from the website. So now that I have this open, I can go to Connect. I can go to Emulator. And you're going to know that it's working because you're going to start seeing, these lines pop up on the screen. All right. And they're just going to keep going and going and going. And then eventually this is going to show up on the screen. And then again, it's still going to take a little bit. So you do just have to wait for this whole process to load and carry out. Now, if you're starting this emulator for the very first time, there is an update that you have to run. All right. And I have posted a separate video that walks you through the update. So again, if you're running it for the first time, there's going to be a little message that pops up. It's going to say, your software is out of date. and then it's going to walk you through the update process. I would just switch over to the other video and watch it, because if you don't do it correctly, it's not going to work, and then it's going to be a pain to fix. So it's better if you just do it right the very first time. All right, so in a second, we should see my little calculator screen. All right, so here it is. If I click on the buttons, absolutely nothing happens. All right, why does nothing happen? Well, nothing happens because we haven't actually written any code that interacts with the calculator yet. All right, so step 2 is to go and actually write the code that's going to allow this calculator to do everything that it needs to do. All right, so all we've done so far is set up the interface. All right, we've set up the interface, we've given our stuff names, but we haven't actually written any code that interacts or makes these buttons do something. And as I said, last week, when you're writing a program, you're responsible for everything. The computer's not going to just say like, oh, they clicked on a 1, so I should make a 1 show up. That 1 is only going to show up if we tell it to show up. So that's going to be sort of the next phase of building this app, is adding all of the code that's going to allow this calculator to actually function. Because right now it's just a bunch of buttons on the screen that do absolutely nothing. All right, so last things last, I just noticed that I didn't change the name of my label 1 here. So again, instead of label 1, I'm going to give it a name that references what it does. So this is my output window. So I'm going to call it output. Again, if you want to give it a different name like window or something like that. Display, display. Maybe display is a good name for it. We'll call it display. But you want to give it some sort of name so that we can see what it's interacting with. All right, so this is where we're going to stop this video. I'm going to do the coding in a separate video so that it's broken up. Word to the wise with these emulators, I would not open the emulator until you've finished setting up the layout. All right. If you try to open the emulator and then do the layout, there's a good chance the emulator is going to crash, because every time you every time you change the layout, the emulator has to reload. And if you start making a bunch of changes all at once, it's going to reload. And then while it's in the process of reloading, it's going to try to reload again. And then it's going to try to reload again. And then eventually it's just going to crash. And then you're going to have to start the whole thing over again. So my advice is don't start the emulator until you've laid everything out. Then you can start it up to make sure it looks good. And then when you write the code, the emulator's fine with that. It's probably not going to crash while you're writing code. It's more likely to crash when you're setting up the display. So always set the display up first, then start the emulator. Then you can start writing your code. The other thing is, if for whatever reason your emulator stops responding, whoops, I didn't want that to happen. If for whatever reason your emulator stops responding, if you go to the connect menu, you can go to reset connection. That will close out the emulator, or you can try refreshing the companion screen. Sometimes refreshing the companion screen should be your first choice, because that might fix the problem if it stops responding. But if the refresh doesn't actually work, like if you click refresh and nothing happens on the emulator screen, that means that it's sort of lost connection. So you're going to have to reset the connection. Never choose hard reset. That undoes the update and resets things to factory settings. You just want to do reset connection. That will close it out. And then you can just restart it. So once you click reset connection, you'll see that these are no longer grayed out. They were grayed out before. And then you can click the emulator and it'll start back up. If for whatever reason it doesn't start back up, like you go and click emulator and it doesn't work, here is the steps that I would follow. All right, I would start by Xing this out. All right, so I would start by Xing out the AI starter program. All All right, so I'm going to close it out. I would then reopen the AI starter program. And this is going to be the part that seems kind of weird. But Xing it out doesn't always clear it out. So if you see right here where it says hit Control C to quit, I would then hit Control C to quit. That kind of really shuts it down. And then I would reopen it and try reconnecting. Now, again, you don't have to do this every time you reset the connection. It's just if you've reset the connection, gone to emulator, and it's still not starting, this is kind of a way to sort of clear everything out, start from scratch, and see if you can get it working. Normally, reset connection is going to work fine. It's going to close the emulator. You're going to start it back up, and it'll fire right back up, and you'll be fine. But if for whatever reason that doesn't happen, this is a way to sort of totally clear it out and see if you can get it working when you reopen the AI starter. And again, it should, if I click on it, you're going to see those numbers pop back up. It's going to load back up, and we're going to be good to go. All right, but we're not going to sit here and wait for that to happen. That kind of wraps up this video. It sort of builds the interface for our calculator. And then next class, we'll actually go and put all the code in that's going to make it function and do the things that we need it to do. All right. So I hope this was helpful. If you have questions, make sure you reach out. All right. The only way this remote learning thing is going to work is if you reach out and you engage with me. So again, if something didn't work, if you couldn't get something to start up, whatever, make sure you're reaching out. I will get back to you as soon as possible. All right. Thanks and have a great day.